Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, the bicycle industry podcast that brings retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders to the mic for honest discussions about the latest issues facing retailers while taking an in-depth look at the person within the profession.
Registration is officially open, and we want you to join us for the second annual NBDA Retailer Summit, May 22nd and 23rd in Bentonville, Arkansas. Our 2024 program features 2 dynamic days of presentations, panel discussions, and breakout sessions aimed to unite retailers and suppliers in conversation. Tickets include an event gift bag, tailored educational events, networking cocktail event and select meals, early access to the Bentonville Bike Fest, not to mention ample riding time on world-class trails. You won't want to miss it, so don't. Get registered today at nbda.com.
All right, welcome. Thanks for joining. This is NBDA President Heather Mason. This is the NBDA News Hour. It is co-hosted each month with our friends from Human Powered Solutions. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Chad Picard, NBDA board member, P2 moderator. Welcome, Chad.
Hello, Miss Heather. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. We also have micromobility experts, Jay Townley, Fred Clemens,
Hello.
Steve Bina. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Heather.
Good day.
All right, Mr. Mike Fritz is traveling today. We will miss him, but we will have a great conversation. Always love this monthly feature.
Yes, it's a great feature. The team at Human Powered Solutions has over 245 years of experience, considered the data wizards. Their monthly newsletter, the Micromobility Reporter, is a dynamic resource for the industry, featuring timely news and in-depth analysis about the latest in human-powered transportation, including bicycles, e-bicycles, e-scooters, and rideshare. Included is a focus on supply chain issues, technology, and both business and consumer trends that drive the marketplace.
It's a great resource, and each month we have the experts on the podcast so we can dive into the articles contained within this report. We want a more in-depth view and have that first-hand seat with the experts. So Chad and I have some questions, and you, the listeners, will get lots of excellent ideas and input from the experts. If you want to receive the email version of this resource, I highly suggest you head to humanpoweredsolutions.com and sign up and get this in your inbox every month. So with that, Chad, let's dive in.
Yes, lots to get into today. The title of the January newsletter, Inflation Eases, but Beware of Phantom Debt and Zombies. Tell us more about the general state of today in the industry. How is 2024 starting out?
At this point, uncertain. And that's unfortunately, the general nature of the economy, of the forecasts. I think you're all aware that last week there was this big gathering of the movers and the shakers, the power in this world, all met in Davos, Switzerland. And while there's a lot of things that came out of Davos, the big issue is uncertainty. You know, there's 2 wars raging in the world as we speak. We've got problems with the Suez Canal and passages through the Red Sea, and so the pipeline to Europe is now changed. We've got issues with the Panama Canal, which are caused by drought. And our friend Steve Bina and his wife went through the Panama Canal, about a month ago to a month and a half ago. So at Human Powered Solutions, we had an upfront and personal view of this. So you've got all these uncertainties. And so, what I'm saying is that we do our best to bring out the pieces that are current on a monthly basis, but projections for 2024 for the bike industry are just beginning to edge their way into the news this month. Ed Benjamin, as an example from Leva, just brought forward his proposals or his projections But he, like the other people that are forecasting, and I admire them because they're willing to eat ground glass at this point and make their projections. Ed is simply saying it looks like it's going to get better the end of 2024 going into 2025. So that seems to be what we're seeing in the bike industry is most of the folks looking at the economic news, which Steve will give us more detail on. And what we're seeing in the trending is uncertainty, concerns about all sorts of issues as we move our way through 2024. Politics not being the least of the issues this year, and the fact that forecasters are being extremely cautious, so that from a business standpoint, business people, particularly mid to small size business people, need to take into account both uncertainty and the ability to pivot, to move their business, to adjust their business on a dime.
It's definitely, what'd you say? Zombies, phantom debt, beware, question mark. Taking a bigger picture look as I'm sitting as the president of the NBDA, working with retailers and with suppliers. I'm feeling a little bit nervous. And I was reading the article that Bloomberg was referencing that companies are going broke gradually, not suddenly. And I think that Human Powered Solutions summed it up by stating simply, stay tuned. We've been seeing some brands, some suppliers indicating that they're maybe in some financial trouble. So I'm wondering, what potential challenges and impacts do you think that bicycle retailers will face as some of these suppliers or industry firms kind of hit the need for some refinancing, but then the interest rates might be higher? Like, I don't know, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, I'm sure that my colleagues will want to weigh in on this, but I think the first thing for a retailer is carefully vet your suppliers.
Mm.
The tendency in this industry has been to go with the brands, and the brands for I guess the obvious reason that they're big guys in the trade. The thinking has been, from a retailer standpoint, is hook on to a brand and it'll carry me forward. The reality is, bike shops are the brand. The local bike shop is the brand in the mind and the eye of the consumer. And so I think that what I'm hearing beginning to work its way through the P2 groups, but coming out in specialty bike retailing, is that the individual bike shop is beginning to realize that they are the brand in their neighborhood, in their community, and they in turn are going to vet the brands they're doing business with and go with the ones that are strong, the ones that are giving them information. In other words, I would be wary of a brand that looks good on paper, but when I ask the rep, when I ask the sales manager, when I ask the company where they stand, what their financial position is, what their inventory position is, if they won't give me an answer, or at least a straight answer, I would move on to people that will talk to me
Mm-hmm.
and give me an answer. And then in turn, I would make my buying decisions based on what of the vendors and suppliers I'm doing business with are going to support me and support my brand and my shop in the market. I think that's the bigger change that has to occur in the thinking. I don't know, Fred, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the going bankrupt slowly concept really resonates with me, especially in an inventory heavy business like ours. Um, we're not through with this inventory overload yet. And until that clears out, we're not really dealing with moment to moment reality of the business. We have this huge hangover, and even if we have an up sales year, we're probably not out of it, even with a slight increase in sales. So I think to plan for instability and don't allow yourself to become over optimistic. Be over optimistic about how great bikes are and how we can really help people, but don't expect big sales increases
this year, it doesn't seem that anyway that that's a realistic way to look at the marketplace. And just beware of zombies.
I love that. And I think Jay, promoting that the retailer is the brand, we saw Denago come into the marketplace and now there's a change there. So I just want the retailer to stay true to who they are, make good business decisions for themselves, and all this other stuff is gonna work itself out. But yeah, everything's to be determined, and keep a careful eye on everything.
Well, and Heather, if I may expound on one of the things that Jay talked about, and that is the financial stability of some of the suppliers. Because of the increase in interest rates over the last 18 months, 18 months, that's put a lot of pressure on the smaller regional banks that some of the suppliers have been working with and some of your dealers may have been working with. The fourth quarter was, in fact, really bad for them. They just haven't been able to keep up with, and they're losing money, these regional banks, because they're seeing their deposits being withdrawn and going to banks that can afford to pay the higher interest rates that these guys can't. The chief executive of Keefe Corp, which is one of the major regional banks, came out and he's quoted as saying, we're in a very uncertain economic period, requires that we run many scenarios so we just figure out the full range of possibilities. And back to Jay and Fred's point is it's uncertain, and you can't just have a business plan. You've got to continue to plan and work to it.
Agreed.
So they only have an article about Canyon, who has an increase in sales, but a decrease in profitability. This referencing the article that was in Brain. In your expert opinion, what measures could Canyon Bicycles implement in response to the decline in profitability despite a significant increase in sales, particularly addressing the issue of higher discounts and supply shortages mentioned in the article?
Well, since I opined about that and offered my opinion that you can't sustain a business very long if you've got increased sales but dropping profitability. And it is the direct result of having to drop prices, of the discounting. Rick Vosper, who is a close friend of all of us, but also writes for Brain, had taken a look at what I had said in the newsletter and said, be aware also that this is a purposeful strategy on the part of Canyon. So to your question, Chad, if I were looking at it as I originally did, my advice would be you're going to have to clean up your inventory as quickly as you can and focus on cash flow so that you can shore up profitability even against the increase in sales. And taking what Rick had responded to that article, it's a purposeful strategy on the part of the GM at Canyon to gain market share. So I think that's another way to look at what are the stronger or the brands with good cash flow and good balance sheets doing in the market. What will they gain from dropping price? And the immediate gain is exactly what Rick is pointing to Canyon and saying this is what they're getting out of what they're doing, is the lower profitability is gaining them market share. So that is one of the strategies. There are some strong brands that are doing that, keeping in mind that Canyon is D2C. That's direct to consumer. They have the dealer profitability from traditional 2 or 3 step distribution to work with. And so that's the difference between they've increased their revenue and decreased their profitability, is they're taking the discounts to lower their retail pricing. And so if that's truly the strategy, it's one that I'm sure some of the dealer brands and the bike shops in the markets can take a look at, but carefully. Be very careful, because if you get to the point where you've got an increase in profitability and an increase in revenue, your dollar sales have increased, but then at the other end of it, you have no profitability, no net pre-tax, then you've accomplished nothing. So you got to make sure there's a balance in those two. So Chad, I think Canyon as a D2C is in between And if Rick is correct, they're using this as a strategy to gain market share in the United States, which is not necessarily a good thing for bike shops.
Yeah,
I might add, if you don't, I was just going to say, decreased profitability doesn't mean no profitability, which is kind of inherent in what you all were talking about. It's not like they're losing money. And it seems that a direct to consumer player like that has probably, potentially anyway, if they make good decisions, they can move out of these tough times quicker because they don't have 1,000 retailers with their own inventory nightmares to manage. They have themselves only. And yes, supply chain problems, inventory problems, but it does seem likely that they can move more quickly as a one company direct channel than having to manage all these independents with their own issues. So I don't know, or not again, but I just don't know Canyon detailed well enough, other than I respect what they do, and I've known Blair Clark, who's the president of the U.S. Division for a long time, and I respect him. So I think they're a good company, and it makes sense that they would, at this time, is a time to try to take advantage of uncertainty in the market, especially if they can move a little quicker than some of their competitors because they manage their own consumer relationship.
Yeah, I guess, Freda, I want to stay here with you because I find that this profitability decline is very threatening. I'm seeing, as Jay was indicating, retailers are taking these discounts, but it's on product that was bought at a certain margin. And then when the extra discounts, it's barely enough to cover operating costs. Fred, you've been in the industry for a very long time. Thoughts for retailers when it comes to following the discounts that they're seeing online? Or if we think about what's behind the discounting, we're really just looking to move inventory. So any thoughts on how we could do that maybe without discounting and remain profitable?
Well, that's the key question, I think. How to manage all of that. And it's so to me, I'm a simple guy when it comes to this kind of stuff. The profitability is your sales and versus your expenses. And so for bike shops over time, it has proven that expense control is one of the big keys. If you spend less, you make more. And so that's not easy to implement. I'm not saying this is a silver bullet of any kind, but and yes, in a crisis, you have to get rid of inventory because that becomes dollars you can reinvest for the future rather than holding on to it and thinking the value is going to increase some way. But this is an age-old problem, with or without a crisis in inventory like we have. Everyone gets into these issues, and to some degree, and I'm back to what Dick Powell said many years ago. I don't want to sell too many bicycles because the margins aren't that good. And I want to sell higher profit accessories and parts and focus on service. So maybe some of it is focusing on the things that can pay the bills and don't sell too many bikes. If you're losing money versus your cost of doing business on every sale, it's not doing you any good. Other than it's freeing up cash for future investment, and you have to get rid of the stuff you've gotten some way. So do you have the financial strength and the ability to get money? Can you project out and do cash flow projections, even with discounting, where half of your sales, if they're bicycles, aren't covering your cost of doing business? It's a very difficult act to pull off. So.
Yeah,
And I would add,
sorry, Jay.
I would add to that used bikes, the circular economy. To Fred's point, if a retailer will look carefully at where their revenue is coming from, where the greatest profitability and greatest potential is coming from, one of the things that James Moore has made abundantly clear is making sure that you've got a proper mix. And I think you can look in times like this to increase the used bike sales, because that's your 50% plus gross margin. It's one of the highest margin products dealers carry and sell. But your ability to acquire that inventory is also built into your business. You
Mm.
can offer a special program to the people you're selling bicycles to on the return or the circular nature of the economy you're building for them to bring it back, and you're taking it as used and putting that back on the market as a perfectly good, rideable, serviceable product that brings consumers back into your store to buy parts, accessories, and service, and also make a higher margin on it.
In our P2 groups, we're continuing to best arm retailers. Steve, I enjoyed your article. Things are getting better, question mark. Can you give us your general opinion on the economy and financial state now? You write, so 2024 is going to be a good year for your business and the bicycle industry in general. I don't know if I'd take that bet. That makes me a little bit uneasy.
Well, and that's probably not a bad position to have, Chad. We've talked about already up to this point a number of things that seem to be going well. However, there's still inventory overhang and things like that. To be sure, a lot of the economic statistics say the economy's doing just peachy. What me worry, we would say. However, that doesn't seem to be sometimes the reality of what we're seeing. Inflation is down, to be sure. It came off a 40-year peak. But what a lot of people miss when they make that statement, or they don't understand fully, is that doesn't mean prices have started to come down. They're still at an elevated level, because when you measure inflation, you measure it usually in a 12-month or a quarterly period looking back. So if you take the numbers where we are, or where we ended up in December of 2023 versus where we were in December of 2021, we had double-digit inflation, and those prices still haven't come down. You get people who get nervous when they go to the grocery store and they say, hey, my groceries are costing me 20-25% more than they did a year ago or 2 years ago. Unemployment numbers are way down. The unemployment rate is way down. The government's claiming that they created 2.7 million jobs, which is great. That's really good that people are getting back to work. The question is, are they getting back to work at the same income level that they had? And also recognize that a lot of that 2.7 are people just getting back the jobs they lost because of the pandemic, when companies had to slow down and lay people off. And if they're coming back, are they coming back? Did they make up the wages that they lost? And also recognizing that a lot of those people, when they were laid off, had to eat into their savings. And so you've got people who are coming back and still trying to make up for lost ground. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is consumer sentiment seems to be rising. The latest study that I saw came out, I believe it was University of Michigan, said consumer confidence was up 2.9% in the fourth quarter, which is a good thing, but we'll just have to wait and see. That's my point with the question mark, because you've got the statistics that say, hey, things are really going pretty well. And you got the reality of it sometimes where people are going, yeah, I'm not really sure.
Steve, I have a question about the election. It's an election year. I've had lots of people are talking about it. How do you think that might play into things?
Well, and Heather, that's a really good question, and I wish I had a really good answer. I think the scary part about the election is, and again, some of the latest polling that I've seen is 60% of the population aren't really crazy about a rematch of 2020. And so what's that going to do? Now, having said that and putting that aside, you can be sure that the current administration is going to do absolutely everything they can to try and keep the economy growing, to try and install higher level of confidence. Whether or not that necessarily leads to additional inflation. And again, we had a little bit of an uptick of inflation in December. There is optimism that the Fed's going to cut interest rates going into 2024. That remains to be seen because of this uptick in inflation. One of the economic statistics keeps saying, well, the Dow's up, it's over 38,000 points, NASDAQ is up, and all of that is great and good. You have a hard time getting change from a 38,000 Dow when you go to the grocery store and you try and buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk. Until you turn that into actual cash, it's a statistic. On the other hand, you're going to have the opposition party saying, hey, things are going to be better when we get in office. It's going to be a muddle, I think. Again, it's going to be uncertainty all the way through, I think, this election cycle.
I like the top level macro look at the economy. What about a more specific look at the bicycle industry?
Well, and you may or may not have seen this, Chad. REI announced yesterday that they were laying off, I want to say, over 300 people.
That's correct.
Because the industry, the outdoor activity industry, is kind of taking it. And their CEO says, I'm not really sure that this is going to get better through all of 2024. So as Jay, you've opined here earlier, and Fred, the same thing, you got to work through the inventory issues. Is there something of an overhang that people went out and they bought during the pandemic and either consumed their savings, or they don't need to buy now because they've already done it? Cash flow is king. Jay, you alluded to that a minute ago, and I can't emphasize that enough. Cash flow absolutely is king. And so I think it's going to be a really cautious year for the bicycle business, and anybody running a bicycle shop can't wait till the end of the quarter or the end of the first 6 months to see how they're doing. They've got to be managing their business on a monthly basis to see where they are and what's going to happen.
Gosh, team, I feel like we're just kind of in this really tough spot right now. And as we're kind of continuing down that road, I mean, the article about over 200 specialized bikes on sale. I mean, the discounting, we're just seeing it across the board, but really to see Specialized do it in such significant ways. Bicycling Magazine published an article which you summarized in the Micromobility. It's a bad time to be in the cycling industry, but a great time to buy a new bike. I see mixed thoughts from the team on this, but are we thinking that this overstock problem might resolve by 2025 or 2026?
Yeah, it's at this point, 2025 appears to be the consensus, and that it might even occur a little sooner if the market picks up. The big question mark for 2024 going to 25 relative to the inventory, discounting inclusive, is whether the consumer is going to come back to buy. And as Steve mentioned in talking about REI, the folks that are in the sporting goods, in the outdoor businesses, are seeing the drop off, and they can't yet account for or identify what has both occurred and when the consumer is going to come back in more strength. This goes to the issue, Heather, that you've been working on extremely hard, which is the belief that, and I concur in this, we need consumer research. And we need it badly. We need to understand why consumers quit buying and when they're going to start buying again relative to the bike shop trade, to this specialty bike retail and overall the bicycle trade. So I think it's extremely important that we get good quality intel or consumer research that will help guide the overall response. And that'll give us a better idea of when, to your question, is it going to be 24 or 25? I guess the outside look at when we're going to see, and believe me, I don't think we're going to go to back to a normal. There is no normal. We're going to go back to a better time. It's going to be different. And it's going to be a market that'll be stronger because it's different. We need to know what the differences are, but that at this point, the most pessimistic is 2025. The most optimistic is Q4 of 2024. I've also seen some of the folks in the industry opine that it's going to be 2026. before we actually see a year where you're going to see an increase. And again, speaking of Rick Vosper, take a look at Vosper's latest article in Brain, and he's got some very nice charts there, or bar charts, that show the 2015 year by year through 2024 projections. And if you take a look at that, it'll give you an idea of where some of this, at least from the standpoint of People for Bikes and the projections they're paying for to be made, are going. 2024 at this point is being projected by People for Bikes at a 9% increase overall. There are many that think that's optimistic for the industry at this point. But that also, from their standpoint, they feel will be wrapped up in kids' bikes and children's bicycles. Is that the correct look at the demographics? Is that a correct look at what's occurring in the market? Keeping in mind that if that is true, the vast majority of children's bikes in this market are sold by mass merchants.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that, what does that mean for different channels of trade? So it goes back to the opener, Heather. It's uncertain.
Yeah.
And the best I can tell you is that you're probably right. We're looking at getting through 2024 with as many people standing as we can, with as few zombies, if you will, which is simply a company that can't pay its debt, can't service its debt. It's just surviving just based on week by week, month by month revenue, but yet can't pay down what's owed. And so if we can keep that to a bare minimum and then build strength through selling those things, as Fred points out, that we can make more money on as a channel of trade, we'll be better prepared for whatever that new thing is, that new market we're going to face, the new possibilities, all the optimism is aiming toward when we get to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and all of this is making me come back to the word communication, because I feel like there's going to be lots of things that we have to go through, and that's including retail or suppliers not having the right product that retailers need, because there's been a little bit of maybe inability to reorder or hesitation to reorder on those key products. So I feel like we're going to come to a position where we're not having the right products that the retailers need, or maybe just not the right quantity of those, but over inventoried on other products. So communication, I think is going to be really, really important as we move through 2024.
Agree.
It's great to see the article 2024 Retail Predictions, 5 Trends to Watch by Chain Store Age, and about the rise of a new word here, the phygital store is the result of a fusion of physical and digital retail strategies to create a cohesive customer journey. Fred, let me ask you this one. How do you anticipate the predicted rise of the phygital store, emphasizing the importance of physical store experience, impacting specialty bicycle retail specifically? Are there unique considerations for strategies that you believe bicycle retailers should adopt to align with this trend in the retail landscape?
Yes, I think the physical store is our advantage as a physical store retailer, and the digital is a way to enhance the customer experience in that direction. So, I mean, you're paying for rent, you're paying for good salespeople, you're paying for lighting and displays. That has to count for something. And it does. And so I think the people still want to do things. And of course, riding a bike is doing a thing. But shopping is something people really like to do. And I think it's been a strategy that successful retailers have used for a long time, that if you can create an experience for the customer, they'll overlook some things like price. And if you can build a relationship with them, price is not the only thing that equals a sale. And so if you can find a way to use that physical store that you are paying for to your advantage and to serve your customers better and to give them more of what they're looking for. I mean, I'm reminded of this oftentimes, because my mind tends to be kind of a straightforward, literal spreadsheet kind of mind, but people are influenced by other things than just does it balance out on a spreadsheet, or is it right or wrong, or what are the facts versus people are emotional and people like to have experiences. And I think that's the advantage that you have for person to person contact at your physical store, face to face, not Zoom, there's value there. And I think it has kept our industry going pretty well up until the COVID thing, for a long time, because people value that. And other industries with physical stores have not had as easy a time. And not that it's an easy time, but and then of course the service and repair component of bicycles is just a built-in advantage. People need that, and mobile repair is it's a good experiment, but I don't see that taking over the marketplace for bicycle repair. Maybe, but I think there are reasons for a physical store to exist in a community, and I think to exploit those and to continue to invest in that would seem to make sense to me.
Such an interesting area to look at, but Fred, I'm so thrilled to hear you say that the actual physical location will still be really important, and what that means in the future. And as we talk about the future physical space, overhead costs, operating expenses associated with physical space, staffing. Lots of people are struggling with cash flow right now, and many of us just go to our local bank to get a loan. At this time of, let's say, the off season before spring really kicks in. And I've heard reports of several retailers having a trouble getting loans. I see the article about the banking crisis impacting community banks and its potential impact on small to mid-sized businesses, including bicycle shops. Anything to point out here? Anything our listeners should know?
Well, I think that to start out with, the way we looked at that article was to offer the advice to especially bike retailers to talk to their loan officer. In other words, get the lay of the land. Even though you may not need it right now, find out what the lay of the land is relative to the availability of funding, the availability of loans. I can tell you that this month's article, which I'm working on now, or this month's articles, the newsletter for the coming month, that crisis is continuing. As Steve pointed out, we're seeing this week more reports of regional banks having problems. And the Fed didn't do anybody any and the regional banks any favors. There's a feature that the Fed had in place for a number of years that essentially was a low-cost loan set available to regional banks to allow them to get monies to help them out. The Fed cut that off. They cut it off this month. It stopped. They can still make the banks can still make applications, but there's no more processing. And after next month, that facility is going to be gone. So I would suggest that a retailer start looking now. If they think they're going to need it, or the possibility their business plan says in the future it could be a requirement if their inventory doesn't go down, I'd start to look for exactly what they can get. And then, Heather, your P2 groups, the work you and Chad have done with retailers, has uncovered a very important piece, which is for retailers to consider, if they've got inventory, seeing what they can do to sell it to other dealers, to make sure that they are using what's available to them in the community and the networking available to them to get their asset requirements, the assets they're holding, the inventory and stock, down to a more manageable level, and hopefully in line with what they're able to finance, either through their own cash flow or for what's available to them in the way of actually, open financing they can get from a lending institution. I certainly would not advise small businesses to go to what has been referred to as the secondary market for loans, or if you will, the black market.
Mhm.
Even though the big guys are doing that in many cases, I would certainly not advise that to a small retailer.
Excellent, Jay. Thank you.
Want to get into the article that Dave DeKaiser wrote for Brain. Big four bike brands can be crucial for retailer success. You state in your summary, the simple fact is that it is not, and it is dramatically different enough that the premise that one or more of the big four bike brands are crucial for retailer success is not longer valid. Jay, tell me more.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier in this podcast, and that is the bike shop is the brand. The local neighborhood store is the brand. Now, I talked to the author. I think I mentioned that he called me and we talked about that article or his article response. He was responding to an article that, again, Rick Vosper had written. Um, I think that both of them are looking at what was. And that was a time pre COVID when the big four had much more control of the market. And there were not 24 e-bike brands D2C in the market and also moving their way into specialty bike retail and moving through different channels of specialty retail that we haven't seen before. Outdoor, the recreational markets in the motorsport business as examples. Um, the latest recalls that are being run on e-bikes that just broke this week are e-bikes that are being recalled because they were sold through the I think Bass bike, not Bass bike shops, the Bass fishing stores.
Bass Pro.
Yeah, Bass Pro. Thank you. You're a bass fisherman, Stephen. I'm not. Bass Pro sells e-bikes.
Yeah.
And so, that's outdoor. That's a totally different channel. Backing all this up, I honestly think that looking at the big four as actually being the movers and shakers of the future is probably not taking into account all of the changes that occurred during the COVID and those that we're beginning to see emerge post-COVID. But nonetheless, it does point out the power that these four do have. And what I didn't mention in the article, I certainly espouse, and some of you have heard me say it before, certainly Fred has over the years, and that is that the four of them all use authorized dealer agreements. My definition of a good authorized dealer agreement is the legal clause in it that says rather than we're going to sue each other, is that we're going to agree to binding arbitration. And that is, but believe it or not, even though that's something that I know Fred, the NBDA, has advocated for decades relative to authorized dealer agreements, is something that is prevalent in the real estate industry, as an example. Real estate brokers don't sue each other because they've got a code of conduct in their association that says we're not going to do bad things. And consequently, we're not going to sue each other. We're going to make sure disputes are settled by binding arbitration. Now, I know that's kind of off the track of the question, but it comes back to I think that we are giving much more deference to the sway the big four hold and the power they've got in the industry than what the current situation is.
Yeah,
Fred, you may have a comment on that.
Fred, you got something?
Just the big four are the big four because they're big and they sell more bikes than the other guys. So they're an important player based on their penetration in the market. And so I think a lot of it, in my experience, depends on the size of store. If you're a bigger store, having a major brand can be a big advantage, help you hook, make your ordering easier. The line itself is broader, so you've got everything from juvenile up to e-bikes and everything in between. It makes sense, but again, I think what Jay said, it's not essential, especially if you're a smaller retailer. You want to really have be very selective in what you carry at each product area and what you want to focus your business on. There are a lot of choices out there that are interesting and creative and different, and people do like differences sometimes. They want a selection.
Yeah, we talked about this article extensively in each one of our P2 groups, and it was interesting to hear the retailers' take on this article. I really like that Chad chose to ask this question and just to hear your expert, thoughts and comment on it. A lot of retailers also are reaching out with questions on dealer agreements as of late, asking us, if they need to sign them, what they can do, how they can best facilitate like more partnership relationships with their brands. So I think there's so much depth to this question. And of course, I'll always advocate for the retailer doing what's best for their business and being open with their supplier and exploring the multitude of different brands out there to work with. I miss Mike today. I know he's traveling, he's working in field, but I don't want to leave the micromobility piece out of the podcast because there were several articles in the newsletter about that. Maybe we could just ask a general state of like what Human Powered Solutions has been working on regarding e-bike safety. Jay, could you update us on that?
Well, I think that there are two primary issues in addition to the detail that we're working on with you folks, the NBDA. I think the two biggest pieces for us have been first the revised protocols that you just published under the NBDA banner, and the simple fact that there is, I think, great merit to the first of 15 points in the protocol, and it's becoming clear for a specialty bike retailer at this point to be able to meet the requirements that, for instance, the city of New York and the fire department of New York are putting in encoding into ordinances, that the way that a specialty retailer can be assured that they are purveying the best possible, the safest possible product with the least risk to their consumers and to have in their stores is to make sure that they're only stocking and selling e-bikes and lithium-ion batteries that meet the requirements of UL 2849 and UL 2271, and those numbers keep repeating, but they are important standards that are tested, certified, and listed by a nationally recognized test laboratory or a NRTL, N-R-T-L. And the reason for that is that a NRTL is chartered by OSHA, and one of the requirements that OSHA places on becoming a NRTL is that when an electrical system like that for an e-bike or a lithium-ion battery is tested, that the NRTL will conduct 4 unannounced inspections of the component plants and component manufacturing sources for that system during the course of at least the year after the test is run. This basically gets to something that my experience as a purchasing director for a large importer and also as formerly the president of a large importer of bicycles is that substitutions tend to get freely made. They sometimes get made and they're telegraphed to the recipient, to the importer, and sometimes they're not. With that background, I don't think that you can, in this environment, provide the highest level of safety and the lowest risk if you're not making sure that your testing, your certification is listed through a NRTL, and that you're getting these 4 unannounced inspections during the course of a period, the 12-month period after the initial testing, to keep the vendors in the primarily China honest and making sure that they're providing safe goods. So with that said, Heather, I think that's the key element, and where it shines or is, to me, most apparent is look at the recall this week through Pacific of the 2 brands that they listed and why they're being recalled because of the fire hazard. The fire hazard is the wiring harness. That's one of the components in one of the plants that would fall into the NRTL unannounced inspections of the 5 key components of a system and would not be covered by the accredited lab approach to, they do a good job of testing, but they test to a standard, they do nothing else. And I'm not knocking them. I'm not trying to degrade them. I don't think the timing is right if we're going to provide a way in which the city of New York is going to be able to allow dealers to continue to sell product that is not going to be impinged upon by all of the restrictions of the current ordinances.
Yeah, Jay, I'm glad you brought that up there. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, they had the article that said, "Don't burn your house down. Here's how to buy safer electronics." And they talk about the increasing amount of incidents, and also emphasizes the risk associated with buying cheap, low quality, fake products. And then also looking for certification labels from nationally recognized testing labs, as you're saying, such as UL, ETL, CSA, SGS. So it's really important. And Steve, going back to your article, you said some of the highlights, the possible spots of highlights for this coming year would be e-bikes, gravel bikes. Just thoughts that you have about us as an industry getting behind advocating for these safe products, because if you're pointing them out as potential highlights, then we want to make sure that we're advocating for the safest things here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I always find it a little bit two ideas at they're fighting each other. One is we want to provide as an industry the best product that we can, the safest product that we can to our customers. It costs too much to get it certified or tested. And I take a look at this and I keep wondering, how can that possibly be? These two should not be mutually exclusive. I think the smart, safest, best path to take is to look at and to make sure that your product is certified and that you can prove that to not only your customers, but to the people that you go to get insurance for your business, both in product liability and in the insurance that you have on your facility. If something happens and burns it down, you want to be able to build it back again and keep going. So it's one of those things that if you're going to be in that business, if you're going to want to sell e-bikes, and I can't imagine that you aren't, you need to be smart about the product that you have and the certifications that come with that product.
If I could jump in here briefly, this is not exactly something you can do about right now, but as Mike Fritz has noted in the past, that we're right on the cusp here in the next couple of years of solid state rechargeable batteries. And I've been seeing more and more at this point, just press releases, mostly from automotive companies, but they promise fewer fires. That's not going to, affect if it's a wiring harness fire, but the batteries won't catch on fire. Greater range. They're talking cars doing 650 miles per charge. Lifespan of the battery, it doesn't just last 2 or 3 years and goes away. It has a long lifespan, and they charge quickly. And that is a category change that I think has the potential for not only obsoleting every lithium ion battery in the marketplace now, maybe it even opens up a retrofit possibility where you can take out the expiring and used up lithium ion batteries and put it in a solid state battery. Maybe that's a long shot, but maybe this also fuels a whole new market where not all, but the fire hazards are abated. All the advantages that I just cited come into play. There's a real bright future, I think, for e-bikes and solid state batteries, as long as they can make their press release into a reality. It does not, though, mean that you're not going to have a continued emphasis on testing and product quality. Because, again, as Jay said, the wiring harness can burn up, a charger can, you need a whole system tested and proven. But the solid state battery seems to me in the next couple of years, it could be a game changer, and I'd just keep my eye on that.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Fred.
And even to that point, though, Fred, and I think you touched on it, if there's a movement from lithium ion to solid state, and there will be, The question will be when. There no doubt will also be testing standards that oversee that product as well. And so if you're getting the dealer or the consumer in a mindset that these should be tested and approved, that'll just transfer from one technology to the next.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Fred. We're going to go back in time now. I think this is a great time to mention the article on Orville and Wilbur Wright, first in flight. I was just in DC at the museum. Not many know that the brothers were first-rate bicycle techs. Orville and Wilbur Wright not only owned and operated the Wright Cycle Company, they designed front hubs and a coaster brake, as well as assembling and eventually manufacturing their own line of bicycles. You state everyone in the bicycle business should not only be proud, but we should celebrate every year on December 17th. Jay, anything more to add here?
Well, we should. It boggles my mind. As you know, I've been in the industry a long time. I started in a bike shop. As part of my career, and Steve will remember this at Schwinn, we had a fellow that made Super 8 movies for us. And what we were doing before of the days of video and handheld devices is during the bike boom, in order to, we call it the silent salesman, in order to get a salesman, in order to get more information out in bike shops so that the wave of consumers coming in to buy bicycles would be able to get the story, as we produce these Super 8mm films in color about the product we were selling. And the producer was in Dayton, Ohio, which should ring a bell because that's where the Wright brothers bike shop was located. Now, Steve, I think will remember some of this, and Michael at this point is in Detroit, Michigan. And today he's visiting the Ford Museum. Henry Ford moved the Wright brothers bike shop brick by brick from Dayton, Ohio, and reassembled it in the Ford Museum in Detroit, Michigan, which seems kind of strange, but there's a replica that sits on the site today. And so because I was down in Dayton on a regular basis, I was able to visit the location many times, also the museums. And why the American bicycle business has ignored this huge historical fact that I think of every time I get on an airplane. And also, Chad, I think the date is extremely important. It's not just December 17th, it's 1908. And think what's happened since then. And this all started in a bike shop. Not only did the Wright brothers design and build the airplane, they needed a lighter, smaller engine to power it. It didn't exist. They designed it and built it in the bike shop. They also figured out that you had to design a proper propeller. And they designed and built that in a bike shop. They got to the point where their lifting bodies could no longer be tested on a bicycle. And so they designed the wind tunnel and patented it. So you're right. These were master bike mechanics. These were guys from bike shops. Why don't we celebrate that on a regular basis? It's huge. Despite the problems we read about with Boeing, they're just building airplanes that the Wright brothers invented. Two guys from a bike shop.
Well,
I'll
clearly,
stop my rant.
Yeah, clearly, Jay, that all of aviation it comes from the Wright brothers and the fact that the first flight was a modified bicycle with wings.
I'm happy to see this in the newsletter, and I'm really glad that Chad brought that up as well. It was really cool going to the museum and seeing that there. So much always in this month's news. I'm really thankful to the team at Human Powered Solutions for putting together this newsletter every month. It's a great resource for someone in the industry. I know we're all moving at such a fast pace, but you do a fantastic job of getting all the important articles in one spot and then doing that synopsis of each article, what it means to the retailer and the industry at large. So super thankful. As always, we're going to end with some specific advice for listeners looking into February 2024. Fred, I know you love this question. Retailers, tips for where their focus should be in February?
Well, I attended with most of you, not Steve, but the CABDA show a couple weeks ago. We're recording this, January 26th. It's been a couple weeks since CABDA, and I saw Heather and Chad and Jay and Mike and a few others doing seminars for retailers. And the seminars were not badly attended. I think there were more people sitting in seminar chairs than there were on the show floor sometimes. My apologies to Jim Kirsten, but it's just true. The education is really important in our industry. And so it got me reflecting a little bit that because I put together seminars for the NBDA for a long time at Interbike, and it made me start to think a little bit. So who attends these seminars? Well, a lot of them are the beginners. Entry level. They're just new. They're curious. They're hungry for information, and they go to all the seminars they can. But mixed in there is intermediate. They've been at it for a few years, but they haven't lost their interest in learning and their curiosity. And in fact, they're almost better to be taught because they have the grounding that the beginners don't quite have. They have the basics in pocket. So some of them drop out. Then they lose their curiosity. They think they know maybe more than they do, but they're out doing their thing anyway. And then the ones that still retain their curiosity. And then you have the expert, and I think I've recounted to this before, and in talking to retailers back when I was doing it, one guy said, "I'm not going to any of your seminars. I should be teaching all these seminars." And I thought, okay, good luck with that. But the fact is he might be right, that he probably has a lot of knowledge. What he's lost is the curiosity part of it. And so that's what, in looking at an audience and trying to craft seminars, who are you trying to reach and why? And I'll wrap this up. So that you can give them knowledge, you can provide resources, you can bring in great ideas and concepts, and that's going to impress them and increase their knowledge base. What they really need, though, is wisdom. They need to take the knowledge. It's not just passing a book test. You're not just taking a quiz and figuring things out. You're trying to gain wisdom. You're trying to use your experience plus what you've learned so that when those key decision points come during the year, you make a better decision, a more informed decision. You're smarter and wiser in what you do. And that's why that expert, in my opinion, needs to continue to invest in themselves, not just the knowledge they have. It's exactly why the P2 program exists, because you can go beyond what you can learn in a seminar, beyond just knowledge. Here's how to do this. Here's how to make a sale. Here's how to organize your store. It allows you to continue to invest in yourself, even once your book learning is basically done. So you retain curiosity, flexibility in thinking, and you become wiser at what you're doing. You make better choices. So that's what I just wanted to make that pitch, because I just saw you all doing great work in presentations. It just brought back to mind, who are we trying to reach and why? Well, I think everyone it's going to be beneficial in business to be able to put yourself in a position to remain open to new ideas, to make then better decisions. It may only be once or twice a year, but that one decision you make better than you would have otherwise could make or break your business.
I love that advice, and it was great to see you in person.
Jay, where should our suppliers be focused?
At this point, I've got three things for them. I think that we need to start instilling integrity in this industry again, because I have become very concerned just talking about the issues of UL 2849, 2271, and the testing certification and listing. Has brought to mind, because of what the blowback and some of the response the NBDA and Human Powered Solutions is getting to what I just said in this podcast about the number one item on the protocols out of 15 is that we are accepting less than the right, honest thing to do for consumers, which means we're accepting less than the best thing we can do for ourselves, for our industry. So I think that we start out with the fact of, folks, let's get some integrity back in this business, so that what we talk about, our word has some meaning, that we're working on the things that, and in this case, I would say, look at what B Corps are asking of the people that go through the year-long process of becoming a B Corp. And there's only one B Corp among the whole of the bike industry today. One. And that's Quality Bicycle Products. And they've gone through a tough time, but yet they still put out their annual report, the second one. So I think that's one of the pieces. Along with that is something that Heather mentioned that's extremely important. Along with integrity, there's honesty, and then there's communication. And we are not doing an effective job of communicating, particularly if, from the standpoint of the bike industry, we are not talking about the things and working together on the things that Fred just mentioned, which is passing the wisdom, talking about the history, which Chad brought up relative to the Wright brothers, which is part of our history in the bicycle business. But the fact that I read in Bicycle Retailer from our folks that I know and trust that put our data and statistics together, that our horizon for looking at data in this industry is 2015. 2015. You can't even do trend line projections if you're only going back 10 years. And I know for a fact and can show you, and the NBDA has already documented and has in their market overview reports data that goes back into the 1990s. And in fact, there's data in the reports that goes back past the bike boom to the 1950s. And it's accurate, consistent annual data. So we don't look at nor accept in dealing with our industry, when we get back to integrity and honesty, the true history of it is part and parcel of what we build on and what we project. So I think we are not effectively communicating as an industry those things we've talked about just in this hour-long podcast.
Thank you, Jay. And I guess, Steve, just financial focus, any advice? Let's go just to retailers specifically, financial focus.
Well, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. The cash flow is king, Heather. Mm-hmm. And in these uncertain times, be ready. There was a sign that I think, Jay, you used to have it in your office that said, planning is okay, but it's the process that's important, or something to that effect. And so you have to be flexible. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to be measuring yourself every day, every week, every month, so that you don't get behind the curve too far, too fast. Because trying to get back to normal, whatever that happens to be, Jay, is going to be really hard if you're starting from a very deep hole. So my advice is watch what's going on, and cash flow is king.
Excellent.
If I could just throw in one last thought, I just noticed here on my desk something that's been on my desk for a long time. Harley Phillips gave me this years ago: illegitimati non carborundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. So I think that is a note of optimism from me, that Harley gave me that probably 25 years ago. So don't let them get you down.
I love that.
Such a wealth of information. We can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your expertise with our listeners so that they are able to stay up to date on important topics facing the industry. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, guys. Bye.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Bicycle Retail Radio. This podcast is designed specifically for the bicycle industry, dedicated to strengthening our retailers and cycling community. If it is your first episode, we urge you to take the time and listen to our past episodes.
The NBDA values the importance of deep interpersonal connections, and our Retailer Summit is designed to be a catalyst for just that. Attending the Retailer Summit in May ensures you meet the right people who know the bicycle industry, respect your business, and want to help you grow, both personally and professionally. It's an easy way to take your business to the next level through networking, engaging with panelists and speakers, problem solving with your fellow attendees, followed by ample riding time on world-class trails. Go to nbda.com/retailer summit for more information and to get your tickets today.